Okay, and then we get to the language and content of social studies. And in social studies, usually we have comparison as a very important skill in being able to, for example, compare different time periods or describe and explain how events happened, etc. So this is pretty challenging because many of the concepts fall outside English language learners' experiences. Many times because if they come from a different country, they haven't learned a lot about the US or US history. And they also haven't really been exposed to the major culture to understand how some of those events play into the way that the US culture perceives the world, or how the events relate to current standings today. Also, social studies is pretty hard for English language learners because many of the concepts are pretty abstract and things that you can't really showcase in the picture, right? So, for example, democracy, justice, freedom. If you think about it, when we talked about semantics, all of these things have a sense, but they don't have a reference, right? There's no image that pops up specifically in your mind that is the direct definition of these concepts, right? These concepts are abstract, they're intangible, and so they're a little bit more challenging for students to understand, especially in a particular context, right? The U.S. history. Also, present information, the information that we present should be from multiple perspectives, right? So in that cultural competence, we need to keep in mind that students come from different places, come from different sort of sub-communities in the US that may see things in different ways. So the Vietnam War to a Vietnamese student would be called the American War, in actual fact, right? And that really represents a great teaching opportunity, right? Where you could stop and as a teacher you can ask, why do you think the war has two names? And think about the great discussion that would come of that and how you can provide that more nuanced understanding for students about how war can be seen differently by those who are participating, right? By the two sides. Okay, so just be careful in social studies to always present things from multiple perspectives. Understand that what's written in the textbook represents one person's understanding of the events, right? And always try and question what it might have been like for others, right? Or for the other participant. What's really important in social studies is also to integrate cooperative learning structures, right? Something like think, pair, share, where the students are interacting with their peers, they're in small groups, they're discussing, because many times students, English language learners, are going to learn a lot more about social studies and about how people in our culture view certain events in history from interacting in a more low-risk situation with their peers, rather than in sort of a whole class format where the teacher's calling out or putting the student on the spot. Okay, so that would be a great technique as well to integrate for social studies. The use of graphic and visual support for assessment is really helpful. Think about using a timeline, right, and pointing to a particular position on the timeline, selecting appropriate words, using maps, using artifacts, pictures of different artifacts in history. But understand that while you're using these graphics during class, just note that these are supposed to be supports to help students gain an understanding of those concepts and get them ready for a test or an assessment where those particular supports wouldn't be available. Okay. And also, as I've said before in this session, provide opportunities for students to become familiar with the grade level materials and the writing. Okay. I'm going to go into one particular way in which you can test your students' grammatical knowledge and also content knowledge. Okay, and this can be used actually with any content area or subject area, but I'm going to show this to you in the medium of social studies because I think this lends itself really well. So closed passages are an assignment or a task where you have students fill in the missing words from a paragraph. Okay, and this can reinforce grammatical knowledge, meaning syntax, meaning, for example, morphology, if you wanted to get that specific. And it could also inform their knowledge of vocabulary, or to test their vocabulary knowledge. So I want to give you an example of what this looks like. And to do that, I'm going to have you go through a closed activity first. Okay. So here we have a paragraph, right? And you can see that there are missing words, okay? And the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what you can do is you can read through here. I provided a word bank for you, and try and figure out which words go in the particular spaces, okay? So you would, for example, you would read, Serena's determination and something work had paid off. And what I want you to do is think about what type of word you think goes here, right? Choose the word, but also pay attention to how you were able to figure it out, okay? How were you able to figure out that that particular type of word belonged in that type of space? I'll give you a second, and then we'll go through it. Okay, so here are the answers, right? What actually went in the space was hard. And if you think about the reason why we chose hard, we know that if there's a space before a noun, what usually would go before the noun is an adjective, right? Because we know that adjectives modify nouns, right? They precede the noun that they modify. And if you continue through, right, and you see, for example, number 3. Number 3 is in delight. So in being a preposition, right? Preposition coming before the noun. Another word that could have been entered here is with, right? And so here, what I'm hoping that you notice is that you're using your syntactical knowledge to fill in some of these words. When we think about words such as number 2, results, or number 5, subject, those are vocabulary words, right? So in order for an English language learner to be able to fill in number 2 correctly, they would have to understand that, first of all, number 2 is a noun. It should be, because the final and the term are adjectives describing that noun. And secondly, that results is another word for grades, or, you know, and to understand the definition of results. Okay, so this is how closed activities can be used, both to test vocabulary knowledge in that content area and also to test syntactical or grammatical knowledge. So the next activity that I'd like you to do is activity 4, where you are going to be making closed activities. So you can find this, the document that contains this information is going to be listed in the session that you're watching this video. It's under activity 4, and it'll have some spaces for you to fill out some of these things that I'm asking you to do. So in the first activity, what I want you to do is read the paragraph and identify what the paragraph is about. Okay. Once you figure out that this is the main topic of the paragraph, I'd like you to underline 6 to 7 vocabulary words that you feel are central to that topic. Okay? Now, once you've done that, right, let's say that you've gone through that activity and done that, you'll notice that if you were to substitute those vocabulary words for slots, right, so that you have now made a closed activity out of this paragraph for an English language learner, and you put those words in a word bank off to the side, as I had done before, that would be a great way to test the content knowledge of the students of this particular topic, which is about Washington, D.C., right? And test their understanding of the vocabulary tied to that topic. And again, you can do this with anything, right? Okay, in the second activity, another way to make a closed activity is to identify and circle 6 to 7 of the same types of linguistic structures that you think are important for students' understanding and ability to either recreate the passage or to understand that subject area. Okay, so if you take a couple of moments, you can pause the video. Try and either choose, I wouldn't choose nouns, because actually nouns are vocabulary words, but verbs or adjectives or adverbs or pronouns, and circle them. And we're going to see how that would actually work out to be a closed activity that is testing grammatical knowledge for ELLs, but within a particular context. Okay, so let me show you what I chose. I chose to do prepositions. Okay, so I have circled all of the prepositions, well, not all of them, but some different prepositions that I came across in this paragraph. Okay, so on, of, for, to, from, in, of, and actually over. Okay, and so imagine that I take these particular prepositions out. I use a slot instead, so there's a place where students can write these in, and I present these words in a word bank towards on one side of the page. Now, this becomes a great assessment to test my students' knowledge of prepositions, right, and which prepositions work in which places. And what's even better about this type of activity is that it's contextualized. So students are still learning about social studies, right? But you're just testing their grammatical knowledge to use prepositions in social studies in this paragraph. Okay? And again, it doesn't have to be prepositions. It could be pronouns. It could be adjectives. It could be any linguistic structure that you would like to pinpoint within the context of social studies. Okay, so that is about it for this session. I'm going to, again, go over the objectives. Hopefully you are able to discuss how culture and society shape cognition and perceptions of ability and intelligence. We talked about cultural competence and what culturally competent teaching looks like. I went through some strategies to promote culturally valid assessment. Hopefully you'll be able to distinguish content objectives from language objectives. We did cover that quite a lot. I went through the problematic aspects of language and of content for math, for social studies, and for science. These should make you aware to some of the aspects that you should be more explicit about with your English language learners. And lastly, you learned how to create closed activities to assess students' grammatical knowledge and also their content knowledge. Very important for English language learners in the content areas. Okay, so that's it for this session and actually for the class. Thanks very much.